Good day, dear students. You are welcome to our today's lecture on the course Translation Problems. The theme of our second lecture is Equivalence in Translation, the first type of equivalence. Please write down the plan of our lecture. There are 2 points. The first point is the notion of the purport of communication. The second point is characteristic features of the first type of equivalence. One of the main goals of translation is to give the translation of the source language text as fully as possible, and as a rule an actual identity of a source language text and target language text is rather considerable. But the differences in source language and target language may limit the possibilities in translation to preserve the content of a source language text on the whole. Translation equivalence can be based on gaining or losing some elements of meaning contained in the source language text. Depending on what part of the content of the text is created for providing its equivalence, we find different types of equivalence. First, what is it for? Second, what is it about? Third, what is said there? Fourth, how is it said? And the fifth, how do equivalent seams differ from one another? On any level of equivalence, the translation can provide interlingual communication. Any text has its communicative functions, that is, informs about some facts, expresses some emotions, sets communicative contacts between people. The presence of such function, such aim in the process of communication determines the general character of the information being passed or transmitted, and it determines its linguistic description. The weather is fine today. Connotation of a fact. What a nice day. Emotions. Open the door. Inducement. And when did you buy this book? Question for contact. If any of these sentences are founded, it means that we can find a generalized functional content. The text may carry out several communicative functions simultaneously or consecutively, but it always has its content, a functional talk, or the aim of communication. The part of text content which points out at the general speech function of a text or a statement in the act of communication makes up its purport of communication. But it presents derived meaning which is present in the text and in a hidden form. The meaning which is taken from the whole text or a statement. Language units take part in the creation of such meaning not through direct meanings, but as a part of the whole. The receptor should understand not only the meaning of language units and their connection with each other, but also he should be able to make some conclusions concerning not only what the source says, but also what he wants to say with it. For example, maybe there is some chemistry between us that doesn't mix. In this example, the purport of communication is in the transmission of the figurative meaning, which makes up the main part of the content of the statement. Here, the communicative effect is achieved through a peculiar description of people's relations compared to those of chemical elements. Such description is found unacceptable by a translator for the target language, and for this purpose is replaced by another description which is not so colorful but provides the same purpose of communication, the necessary communicative effect. Second example, that's a pretty thing to say. In this example, the purpose of communication is implied by the expression of the speaker's emotion, who is indignant with the previous statements of the other speaker. To render it in translation, an interpreter uses one of the usual phrases that people use to express their indignation, though the constituent part of its statement do not correspond to the language units of the source language sentence. The third, those evening bells, how many a tale their music tells. In this third example, we see that the general function of the statement in a source language is its poetical influence, which is based on sound recording, rhyme, and meter. To render poetical peculiarities of the information, the initial statement is replaced by another one which provides the same communicative function. So we see that the purpose of communication represents the most general part of the content, which is characteristic to the statement on the whole and determines its role of communication. The following features are characteristic to the relations between source language text and target language text in the first type of equivalence. First, absence of correlation between lexical units and syntactical structure. Second, impossibility to connect the vocabulary and structure of source language text and target language text with the relations of semantic paraphrase or syntactic transformation. The third, absence of direct and real logical ties between statements in the source language text and target language text, which could make it possible to say that in both cases it is said about one and the same thing. And the fourth, the least community of source language text and target language text in comparison with the other types of translation, which are found equivalent. We give translations of this level of equivalence when a more detailed reproduction of the content is not possible, and also in cases when translation can lead to the receptor of translation to quite different associations than those of the receptor of the original text, and thus can prevent him from giving the translation of the purpose of communication. For example, that's a pretty kettle of fish. No pain, no gain. Here, in these examples, we cannot discover any common themes or analog structures in the original and the translation. The language units are not similar, and there is no logical link between the two messages, which could lead to the conclusion that they imply the same thing. But it is evident that the two sentences have something in common. We can see that common to the original text and its translation in the case is only the general idea of the message. In other words, the translation conveys what the original is set for, that is, what the source meant, what the aim of the message is, or the purpose of communication. Now, dear students, you are given references which will be necessary for you during your preparation for your seminar lessons. Thank you for your attention.